The following video is brought to you by Sports Radio New York.
Totally do. I'm joined by the hitting coach for the Scanton Wilkes-Barre Yankees and a former Yankee himself, Butch Wynegar. And he's the hitting coach, of course, for the AAA Scanton Wilkes-Barre Yankees. Butch, pleasure to talk to you. How you doing?
I'm doing outstanding. I appreciate you having me. I look forward to it.
No problem, Butch. I'll tell you what. Here's on a little curveball to start off. You started your career in Minnesota in '77, runner-up to Mark Fidderich in the Rookie of the Year. But I want to know, the Target Field is opening next year. No dome, Minnesota, the cold. You played, I believe, in the old Met. Mm-hmm. How the heck are those guys going to play in April and October and, God forbid, November?
Well, it's funny you bring it up. First of all, I'm kind of in my heart, I'm kind of glad to see him getting back to the outdoor dome. It kind of reminds you of the old Metropolitan Stadium. Before I was traded to the Yankees, I did not like playing in the Metrodome every night. And so when I was traded, it wasn't a big disappointment to me. I just got done talking the other day to J.J. Hardy, who was just traded over to the Twins, who I had over in Milwaukee. And we talked about that, too. And he said that was his one worry about the coldness in April and early part of May and even into September and everything, and how he's going to handle that. So that will be an adjustment for him.
Yeah, and I remember Brian Hunter, who played for the Braves, was on the show, and we were talking about that '91 World Series. And I said, how is it playing the old Metrodome? It's funny you bring it up. He just kept talking about the roof. And I know you weren't an outfielder, but even as a catcher, those pop-ups and playing in that place, it was a great home field, though, I'm sure, because it was always so loud.
It was. I mean, the fans in Minnesota are tremendous. And, you know, I've always been a Twin at heart. That was my first team I ever played for. But the fans up there, you know, typical Midwestern fans, they love the Twins. They're great people. The Metrodome itself, I remember coming back in as a visiting player with the Yankees when Billy Martin was the manager, and we'd go out early, and he'd make everybody take pop-ups just to try to get used to the roof. And back then, when it was pretty new, the roof was almost a pure white. So if you took your eyes off the ball at all at any time, you just lost it. You couldn't pick it up again. So that was one. I think that was one of the home field advantages that the Twins would have playing in there every night.
And for me, I started watching baseball in, you know, the mid-'80s, and I'm thinking, you know, there's not really many turf stadiums anymore. The Metrodome's going. I guess Toronto, obviously. I remember thinking back, St. Louis had one. You know, it's kind of like a dinosaur now, and you know, that's difficult, too, for you guys when, you know, again, you're a catcher, different type of toils on the body, but are you happy to see that kind of go?
Yeah, I kind of am. I mean, I was kind of torn because as a hitter, you liked it. You know, as a catcher, working with your pitchers and everything, you knew the pitchers hated it. But I remember the old Kansas City teams and everything with the speed that they had, and you know, Frank White and Willie Wilson, and you know, guys that could just fly, and they just put the ball on the ground and just beat balls out, and they just pin you to death. But I kind of am. I like the old turf. Just old school, I guess you'd say. And I know that the Scranton field that we just moved into 3 years ago there in AAA used to be artificial. It used to be AstroTurf. And then when we took it over, the Yankees, I mean, that they ripped it out and put in grass. Yeah. So I am. I'm kind of old school, and I like the grass turf.
You picked the wrong season to have, you know, your rookie season and break in. I mean, look, you had an outstanding season, but it was the Mark Fidderich show. You would have been rookie of the year. You know, what do you remember about breaking in? I mean, that's quite a. I mean, look, finishing runner-up to Mark Fidderich, nothing to be upset about.
It really wasn't. You know, I didn't get to know Mark, you know, personally that well and everything, but I faced him. Just a tremendous entertainer on the mound. I mean, he had good stuff. He kept the ball down well, sinker-slider type guy. Talked to the ball, down on his hands and knees, patting dirt on the mound and everything. And he just packed the house. People were calling the front office, wanting to know if Mark Fidderich was throwing that series and when he was throwing. And it was a call. I mean, they just really packed the house for Mark. So, you know, I was 20 years old, and I was just elated. I was just humbled that, you know, I was even a big leaguer at 20 years old. So, you know, to lose out to Mark Fidderich that year, that wasn't a big disappointment. I was just so happy and just honored just to be a major league player at 20 years old then.
And in those early years, you played in back-to-back All-Star games. And I looked at the box scores, and I'm like, wow, you had a chance. You were the third-string catcher, but you were behind Carlton Fisk and Thurman Munson, two great catchers. I mean, did you have a chance in those games? I know that back then maybe the fraternizing wasn't the same as it is today, but to pick those guys' brains and learn at a young age from two of the best?
I tell you what, I was scared to death. I'm going to be flat out honest with you. I was over my head there. I was nervous, and I talked to them, yeah, but I surely didn't pick their brains or anything. I was there with Rod Carew, who was with me at the time with the Twins, so I was kind of Rod's shadow. Where Rod went, I went, because I had no clue what was going on. Rod had been there many a times, so I knew I couldn't go wrong if I followed him around. So I pretty much just kept my mouth shut and did the things I was supposed to do, and that was it. But that's two great honors that I am very, very tickled with and everything, and I still have both my All-Star rings. I only wear them in the off-season now and then with my wife when we go out, but it does get noticed once in a while, and people are they're pretty in awe of it when they see it and everything. So I just don't wear a lot of jewelry, but those are two tremendous accomplishments I did have, yes.
And you got a hit and a walk in the All-Star game. Look, great hitters go 0 in the All-Star game. So is that your memory, getting on base? I mean, what do you take away from those 2 years?
Well, my first year, I didn't play, and I was sitting down in the dugout about the 7th inning, and Gene Mock, my manager at that time, I see him walking towards me, and he taps me on the knee, and he goes, "You're going to hit for Louis Tiant this inning," and I'm scared to death. But I went to the plate. It was in Philadelphia, and I grew up in York, Pennsylvania, so I knew all the people back home were watching. Somehow, I worked a walk off the Count Montefusco, who I ended up playing with the Yankees. So that was my. I sprinted to first base like I was Pete Rose, and so that was my recollection of that first year. The second year, I got to catch I think about 4 innings in Yankee Stadium, catching Billy Campbell, who was one of my relievers with the Twins. I caught Sparky Lyle, and I got my first hit off of Tom Seaver, a bouncer between first and second in the right field. So. I can always say I was 1 for 2 with a walk in the All-Star game, and be very proud of that.
Yeah, and then you go to the Yankees. So when you went to the Yankees, I mean, Thurman, obviously, by the time you had gotten there, had passed on. Cerrone was there. I know that, for quite a while, until Posada, really, they never filled the catcher's position. There was always that shadow. How was it going to the Yankees, having a little bit of that Thurman shadow? Cerrone was on the show last year, talked a little bit about it. He was like, "Hey, I'm Rick Cerrone. I'm not going to worry about it." For you, how was that coming to New York?
Well, I'll tell you what, I grew up a Yankee fan. My dad was a huge Yankee fan. Of course, then I became a Yankee fan. Mickey Mantle was my idol, and he was the reason why I became a switch hitter.
The preceding video was a production of Sports Radio New York. To view this interview in its entirety and to access all Sports Radio New York content, just visit sportsradiony.com.